and happy STAMPtember, friends. This is Yana Smakula, and today I am super excited to show you one of the new STAMPtember exclusive collaboration sets, the Long Stem Flowers by Paper Rose. This is a truly beautiful, large 6x8 floral stamp set. It includes several flowers, flower buds, leaves, and very long stems. The slimline cards are all the rage now, and these long stems are long enough to be used on a slimline card. The card I have for you today only uses the flowers and leaves without the stems. I love the look of white flowers on a blue background, and so for today's project, I decided I'd go with white flowers. Coloring a white flower can be a little bit tricky, but I found it not that hard and not that impossible to do. Here, I've started stamping the images in Memento TUXEDO black ink onto Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. I'm using my mini MISTI stamping tool as it allows me to double stamp the images to have a nice, crisp black outline. Here I've stamped 3 large flowers and 3 leaves, but I'll also add additional imagery to my card later. I'll stamp additional flower buds and leaves to build my composition. As for coloring, I am using Copic markers, and as always, I'm going with my go-to colors. For the leaves, I'm using G21, YG63, and G94. I love the combination of these and the shade of green that I'm able to get with these colors. It's not a vibrant grass green, but more of a muted green color. I don't know how to describe it, but it's very pretty. Now, I'm not being very careful when coloring, and my marker does go outside the line a lot. I'm not worried about it, as I will be coloring the outside space with a dark blue color to match the background of the card. Now also, if you plan to fussy cut your images using scissors, you don't need to worry about the marker bleeding outside the line, as you can just cut that bleeding off. Now, there are coordinating dies available for this stamp set, but I don't have the dies on hand, so I know I'll be fussy cutting these, so the bleeding isn't a concern for me in this particular case. Next, to color the flowers white, I'm using 2 light blue markers, B000 and B00. Now, the flower itself is white, but as we know, white isn't all completely white. There are shadows and there are highlights. If I keep my flower as is, pure white, the flower will look lifeless. It will lay flat on my card. So I need to add some basic shading to add interest. I can do that with any light color marker I want. Since I know that my background will be blue, I am matching the color of the shadow to the background, and I'm using light blue markers to add shading to the flowers. However, you can use other colors as well. You can use a light gray color for a neutral white flower. I actually would love to try to use a light pink for some light pink shadows, or maybe even light purple shadows. Don't be afraid to experiment and try new things. Try coloring a white flower. You might enjoy it. Now, if you feel you've added too much color, too much shadow, you can always use a colorless blender marker and erase that color with the colorless blender. I did do some erasing on a couple of petals where I felt I've added too much blue. Now, I want the background for my card to be dark blue. I love blue and I often use it for my projects. Maybe I even use it too much. I don't know. Anyhow, I know I'll be fussy cutting my flowers out and I'll foam mount them onto a blue background. To make it easier for myself to fussy cut, so that I don't have to follow the stamp line exactly and precisely, I'm adding a thin dark blue border around the images. This blue border matches in color to the background that I will be using. I'm using a B99 marker. This is the darkest blue that I have in my stash, and I love this color. You can also use this trick when you cut the images out using a coordinating die, and I've done that on many occasions in the past. Just carefully color next to the stamped line outside the actual image. Having added that blue border, I cut the images out using scissors. Now, I wasn't too careful and I wasn't too meticulous when cutting these out. The way I have this card planned, the cut line won't be that visible. and no one will know that I have cut imperfections on the card. So I just added that blue outline to make it easier for myself to cut the images out. Now, to create a sentiment for this project, I white heat embossed Happy Birthday from the same stamp set on black cardstock. I treated the paper with anti-static powder, I inked the stamp with clear embossing ink, and stamped it. Next, I added detail white embossing powder and heat set it with my heat tool to melt the powder in place. Once the powder was melted and has had a couple of seconds to cool off, I used a pencil eraser and erased the milky residue that I had on the paper, and this gave me a beautiful, crisp sentiment for my card. Next, I worked on the background. I ink blended dark blue ink around the edges to darken them up. I first blended a medium blue shade, and that was Blue Hawaii from Hero Arts, although this color can easily be skipped as it's not really adding any shading to the cardstock. Once that color dries, it becomes invisible. And then I added Navy from Hero Arts. This is the color that actually added darkness around the edges of my panel. If you want, you can also use black and even add a little bit of black. I skipped the black for this particular card and only used that navy color for the most part. I left the panel to dry for a few minutes. Meanwhile, I arranged the images the way I wanted them on top of the panel, and here you can see how one of the flowers overlaps the flower behind it. And you can see that there's too much of that blue outline showing. I'm going to use my scissors and make a pretty detailed cut right there in that spot or in that area to eliminate that. So I'm not cutting right up to the edge around the entire flower, but just cutting right up to the edge in that one particular section, in that one tiny section for this flower. And here, that looks so much better once that blue was cut off. I added washi tape over my cluster as I didn't want to have to rebuild it from scratch again. And you can use press and seal for that as well. I don't have any press and seal on hand, so I used white washi tape from my stash to secure the entire cluster together. It's a neat trick. And once you've built something, it really helps you to preserve the composition together without having to rebuild it all over again. I flipped the cluster to the other side. I added foam adhesive squares from the back, and having done that, I adhered the cluster onto the background. I removed the washi tape holding the pieces in place, and I love this result. Now, to embellish this card, I added silver sequins and also silver gems, as well as a few clear droplets, small clear droplets. I also used a white pen and added white dots here and there. I feel that added a lot of interest to the background. By the way, a white pen was also used to color the center of the flowers. Where I had colored over the stamens with a light blue, I wanted to make them white, so I used a white pen and colored over that blue coloring with a white pen. Now, I also added a few additional flower buds and leaves to this card, making my floral cluster a bit fuller. I didn't film that part as it was the same, but here you can see a photo of the finished project. I hope you like this card. Now, if you make a card inspired by this video, we'd love it if you shared your project and tagged us on social media. We always enjoy seeing what you make. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet done so. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you next time. And happy STAMPtember. Bye!